Welcome to the Apostolate's Peace of Heart Forum Classic Series, where hundreds of key personalities in the Church share insights and wisdom from classic spiritual literature. These experts are interviewed by the Apostolate's founder from a unique family perspective, so that the spiritual insights shared can be applied to our everyday lives and give us peace of heart. Let's now join the discussion.
Well, we just want to welcome you to this is the final show in a series that we're doing on St. Louis de Montfort's Catechism on True Devotion to Mary. This is sort of a catechesis on some of the more popular questions about this great devotion that Pope John Paul lived and died with and sent into the Church in such a powerful way. And we have Father Hugh Gillespie with us, who is a Monfort missionary, to guide us today. Father, welcome. And Father Bernard Geiger, my spiritual director, and Franciscan staff here. Well, we're into the question 35. When de Montfort says Mary will be the only means used by our soul in dealing with God, does he mean to say that we are no longer to pray directly to Jesus? Here we go again. We come back to that. I think that's the most common thing people come back to.
It really is. And in part because it really is a difficult concept to fully master. And you know, as we said before, it's the kind of question that one who tries to practice a spirituality has to keep returning to. And you notice the many forms it comes up in. And the concern is almost always about shortchanging Jesus, or if somehow Mary gets in the way of my intimacy with the Lord. And so it becomes important repeatedly, and Monfort himself in his own writings is conscious of these questions, and he keeps stopping himself and saying, now let's be clear. Let's take another look. What we're talking about here is not that you can never go directly to Jesus again, but that your manner of going to Jesus be transformed and become more deep and more intimate. And if we just build on a couple of the things we said in the last session, where we talked about being in Mary, which is where we meet Jesus. Well, note here, I'm going very directly to Jesus. Within Mary, within the love of Mary, I stand face to face with Christ in a more intimate way than I ever could without it, in a more intimate way than I could ever have possible without her, because this is where I stand most closely united to Christ.
Well, it's amazing. In the last encyclical of John Paul on the Eucharist before he died, he talked about Mary being present at every Mass, right, in this formal teaching on the Eucharist. And he said it's traditionally accepted by the Church that Mary is present at every Mass. And it wasn't just a passing comment.
Right. And Monfort is under no illusion that a healthy way of living this devotion is to never speak directly to Jesus, that one stops every minute before one speaks to Jesus and says, let me give this to Mary first. Because again, that would be the height of scrupulosity.
Right.
And what Monfort is saying is that as I live this devotion, as I grow in this devotion, those moments when I do directly approach the Lord are transformed and changed, and they're more profound than they had been before. And so what he's saying is, I go to Mary and I turn to Mary because there and through her, I most directly encounter the Lord.
Right.
And so there's less of a filter between the Lord and myself, because I've let myself go to the point where now I can truly meet the Lord.
Beautiful. Father, do you have any insights you would like to share on that?
Well, it's hard to add to that.
Yeah, we go on to the next one. I think 36. If we perform all our actions through Mary, can we still pray to the other saints? That's a good question.
Well, you know, I should let you answer that, because you know, one of the elements that the Apostolate has added to its appropriation, its particular appropriation of Monfort's consecration, of Monfort's spirituality, is a movement that incorporates St. Joseph very explicitly.
Right.
And so obviously, if I asked you to answer that question, you're saying, well, of course, at least in the case of Joseph.
Yeah, Joseph, big time, because they were never separated. Yeah.
Monfort, in his letters, would do something very beautiful a number of times, where he would say, I salute your guardian angel, to someone he was writing to. Now, if we just take this simple example very seriously, obviously Monfort paid attention to the other saints. In his writings about Mary, what is Monfort doing? He's quoting the saints, and he's telling their stories, and he's drawing from their example. You've mentioned a couple times how regularly Louis de Montfort quotes St. Bonaventure out of the Franciscan tradition. He's a great favorite of Montfort's. So Monfort, even in his talking about Mary, is invoking the saints. And so what Monfort is going to say, by all means, continue to pray to the saints. By all means, continue to profit from their example. It's not like they're disconnected from Our Lady, but they're members of the same mystical body, and many of them consecrated their lives to her as her children and her slaves as well. And so Monfort, and frankly, we're going to consult Louis de Montfort on this all the way through.
Yes, we're talking to a saint all the way here.
You know, so what Monfort really wants to say is this is not something that sets itself up in competition to other forms of spirituality. Now, Monfort would say, however, we want to be careful, though, too, in a sense of trying to be spiritually greedy and say, well, here's another devotion to do, here's another one, here's another one.
That's something we got to watch out
And Montfort's going to say, well, back off, okay? Do it simply, do it well, do it honestly, and do it lovingly, but by all means, continue to do it.
We can be multiplying devotions and being swallowed up, just like some people are saying they got to get 15 decades of the rosary in a day, and they get very upset if they don't do it. They're losing the very heart of it, you know.
And so Monfort would caution us if we're tripping over ourselves and we're tripping over our prayer to include as many saints as we possibly can, because at some point Monfort's going to say, look, ask the saints for their intercession, profit from their example, but also remember that the fruit of this devotion is a confidence. A secure confidence in the providence of God and the love of this mother He's given us. And so don't do this out of a scrupulous fear or out of a desire as if somehow it's not good enough and I got to get more in.
Father Bernard, your insights?
Well, I think that what came to my mind was my own mom. And more than once she would say, my prayer and my hope for all of you kids is that you'll love each other. And I can't help but think that Mary herself, and it's my own experience, she herself will bring us into a deeper communion with our brothers and sisters, the saints. That God, of course, wants them to be, He wants, you know, the mystical body is not just here on earth, it's also with all of the saints in heaven. And so there'll be some that we'll be closer to, our own patron saints, for instance, and others that we have a special devotion to, like most people seem to have great devotion to Saint Therese. And I think Our Lady has a big part in this, that she will lead us into a deeper union with other particular saints, that she might want them to have an influence in our lives in some way.
They also had a deep devotion to Mary, every one of them.
Every one.
Yes. And the other piece of this, picking up on what Father Bernard has said, is we're a people who, through our history, celebrates the great things God has done in the lives of those who have gone before us, as much as we do in the present. And Monfort is certainly not going to say, forget that. In fact, what this is supposed to do is bring us into a deeper continuity, a deeper contact with our tradition, which is not just a tradition of practices and rituals and observances and doctrines, but a living tradition of men and women. This great council of the saints who has really passed on our faith to us. And Monfort says, by all means, experience continuity with them and celebrate them. Because Mary herself went to see her cousin Elizabeth, not just to help her, but remember what Gabriel said to her, so that you will know that all things are possible for God. And Mary goes to celebrate and to witness this great thing God has done in the life of her cousin. Well, she, who literally traveled to do that, is hardly going to object if we witness and celebrate the wonderful things God has done in other lives.